Talk Radio.
There are shows with psychics.
And there are shows with doctors.
But there's no show like The Psychic and the Doc.
Your practical paranormal power unleashed.
This show synthesizes the talents of world-class medium Mark Anthony, the psychic lawyer, psychic explorer,
and street smart spiritualist, behavioral psychologist, Dr. Pat Baccili. All subjects are on the table and no topic is taboo. Inspiration, insight,
action, and fun as Mark Anthony connects callers with loved ones in spirit.
In tandem with Dr. Pat's fresh, no-nonsense, street smart, intuitive insights. And she is hilarious.
Extraordinary problems
require extraordinary solutions, which may come from this side
or the other side. This is The Psychic
and the Doc, and it starts now. Wow, welcome everybody. Excited to be here tonight with my amazing co-host, the one and only Dr. Pat Baccili. How you doing tonight, Dr. Pat?
Yeah, pretty dang good. Just saying.
And let me tell you, and we have a great show lined up tonight. Today, as everyone knows, is Thursday, April 14th, and tomorrow is not only the dreaded April 15th, but it's also the first day of Passover. And our guest tonight, Jacob Cooper.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
What do you mean the dreaded April 15th?
Well, that's a tax day. Everybody's got to pay their taxes.
No. It's the 14th where, hi, Bill. Hello. Can you please extend year number 1, 2, 3, and 4 again for me? That's what it is for me.
Well,
I'm not a procrastinator, for real. I'm not.
Well, when you ask a scientist, what's 2 plus 2, they'll say 4. When you ask an accountant what's 2 plus 2, and he or she will say, well, what do you need it to be? So.
and then when you ask a lawyer to step up and say your accountant just said that, they'll say, plead the fifth.
Plead the fifth, and we disavow all knowledge, and we had nothing to do with the sinking of the Russian flagship in the Black Sea today. Oh, did I say that?
My gosh. Please don't.
Yeah, I take no consolation in the suffering of others, and I just wish that the way of in light would come through, and this violence would stop. But on a more esoteric, metaphysical level, we have an incredible guest tonight, Jacob Cooper, and Jacob's a perfect guest for a lot of reasons. Tomorrow starts Passover, and he was raised in an Orthodox Jewish family, but he had a near-death experience as a toddler, which has influenced and shaped the direction of his life. And like many NDEers, Jacob believes in service to humanity. In fact, he's devoted his life to helping people. He's a clinical social worker, a certified Reiki master, and a certified hypnotherapist who specializes in past life regression therapy. Jacob has written an incredible book, Life After Breath, and I'm very honored to have endorsed his book. So without further ado, welcome to the Psychic and the Doc, Jacob Cooper.
Hey, Jacob.
Hey, an honor to be your guest. Thank you.
Hey, got a burning question right out of the gate.
Bring it.
So I was reading. So you were born in the Northeast, like New York or Boston, New York, like
not
Bronx?
like New York, but in New York. I was raised in Long Island.
Well, that's what I was just going to go there. I was just going to give you the Long Island.
I'm a little too calm for the city, so you figure either upstate or Long Island. But yes, born and raised here. So.
I could see you like Long Island, like surfing out there at the end of that Long Island thing. I could see moments of that.
I like the water. That's a good part about here. So, and it's always good to be by water. It's good for spirituality, intuition. So.
Oh, I know that. Yeah. Pack up your bags and move to Seattle. That's what you do. More water than you can imagine. whether it's out there or pouring down from the skies. Great to have you, Mark. We've got a lot to talk about here, right?
We do. I mean, there's so many different directions we can go in, but because it's Passover, and I know that Jacob, you have spent quite a bit of time in Israel, and you lived there for a while, didn't you?
Yeah, about a year. I took a gap year after high school, and I lived there and studied there, and it was just a transformational year in my life path. It really was.
But you lived in a place that is famous for a biblical hero, so to speak. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, no, I lived in the same town where, if you're familiar with Samson, who in Judaism was called a Nazir, like someone who wasn't cutting his hair and stuff like that. And he was like a real kind of like trying to put like a real warrior, and he would take on all kinds of no one could really take on this guy. He was such a force. But I lived in a place called Beit Shemesh. Beit in Hebrew is house, and Shemesh in the Hebrew language is sun. So it's the house of the sun. And I think outside of learning a lot, one of my biggest accomplishment was getting a great suntan when I came back home. Seriously, it's like I was bathing in the inner light and the outer light there, so it was wonderful. But when I traveled in Israel, I went to the town where if you're familiar with it, the Kabbalah or the origins of Jewish mysticism was birthed. It's a town called Safad, if you're familiar with it, which is kind of like higher altitudes in the mountains, but really a lot of the quote unquote occult tools that we use, whether through tarot or astrological stuff, is, a lot of that is rooted in the Kabbalistic teachings. So it's a very deep part of Judaism.
Yeah. Increasingly phenomenal and insightful, especially if we take a look at it in the current times we're living in.
Yeah. And it's different than what it originated, because it was for kind of like a PhD type, student. You really had to learn the Old Testament inside and out and understand the rules, and they would have hesitancy about people diving into it because it was a very powerful teaching. But now, we're seeing online courses in the city for it. So, today it's a different accessibility than it once was.
Yeah. I have to tell you a pop culture trivial, and, Madonna.
Yeah.
I just have to say, Madonna did more to make us more aware. I mean, think about it. Pop culture Madonna, really opened the door for a lot of people to say it's okay to explore this, because dogma of religion will say to you it's not okay.
Yeah, well, she's very true to her sign in Leo. Like, she's just like a free spirit, and she was very much about empowerment and being true to yourself. A big advocate for LGBTQ rights before it was popular. So a real groundbreaker. I got to give her credit.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the comeback. Just saying.
Yeah.
I don't think Madonna is ever going to fade away.
No.
She has been a trendsetter for so long, and but we were talking earlier today. I gave Jacob a call, because I met Jacob a few years back at the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And, so over the years, we've sparked up a friendship. And I called him and, I said, well, tonight's the evening before Passover begins. And Jacob, you said something really, really interesting about an analogy between a near-death experience and Passover. And I mean, that I was very impressed. And could you share that with our audience?
Absolutely. I mean, even the root word Passover has, a little bit of a similarity with a near-death experience, in the sense it has, when you pass over. But, the root word had to do with, at the time the Israelites, were, in Egypt, and they were in bondage, with Pharaoh. And the Israelites were the descendant of, Jacob and Joseph, who was, Pharaoh's astrologer, and they, lived, there in Egypt, but they were in bondage. And, what happened was Moses, was a shepherd, I guess, and he had a vision of a burning bush, and as they say, God, or whatever you want to call it, told Moses to speak to Pharaoh and ask, let my people go. And Pharaoh said no, but then eventually the plagues kind of came, to, Pharaoh and stuff like that. And finally he said, I'm going to let you go. But then once they were about to leave, they had to rush, where the theme of the matzah, or the unleavened bread, is there, because they had to rush to make their bread. So that's where the custom comes from. But as they were about to leave, Pharaoh, was chasing them, and then they say the Red Sea split, and it kind of swallowed up all of the word is Mitzrim, but that means Egypt, Egyptians. But in a sense, a lot of the Jewish history is that in a nutshell, where your back is against the wall, there's no hope, you're oppressed, and then there's the light, there's freedom. And I think the same thing with many other near-death experiencers, in mine too, where you're finding ultimate salvation, ultimate life, where there is none. And, so there is a lot of parallels between the two, finding, life within the absence of it. And as well as trusting in the light, because Passover is a holiday of faith. And I think once the Israelites were able to trust in God's commandments and follow them, and they had to, I think, sacrifice a lamb and put that blood over the door, that's where the word Passover, God protected and passed over the homes, is when they were able to really have salvation. So near-death experiencers surrendering themselves to that light and letting go over the pain, is a liberating component that's in both.
Go ahead, Dr. Pat.
I just want to comment for a minute about the way you wrote the book, because I've been doing this for a while, and there are a lot of books that I pick up and I read, and they read almost like I'm getting ready to write my dissertation. But I have to tell you, I hung on every sentence. Oh. I mean, I followed this story, and as a matter of fact, by the time I got to page 20, I'm crying. Now, I don't know if there was something energetically, but I will say this: the beautiful way, and the reason I'm commenting is because you speak that way. See, energetically, there's something in your soul that has allowed you to express to a world in a way that we could all experience the possibilities of this level of transformation. And I didn't know it until I heard you speak. Yeah, putting all the joking aside, just hearing you chat with Mark right there, it was really clear to me that as I was reading this, especially about the covenant, I'm a little bit different, and Mark will tell you this. Not all near-death experiences happen in this way. Sometimes they happen where you don't even know that happened. But when you get back from the emergency ward and months of testing and electrodes hooked up to you and people telling you they think you're on the spectrum, all of a sudden you stop doing everything you were doing in your life and you make a different path. But the way that you describe this, just the language and the beauty of it, it allows people to relate. And that's what I wanted to say. Go ahead, Mark. I just wanted to comment about that, because this kind of awakening, and so many people feel guilt and shame, and their parents and their friends, I mean, they don't know where to go with this. I hope they read your book.
Oh, thank you.
It really is. It's like you're putting your hand out and you're holding your hand out, an open hand, and you're saying, come with me. You're okay.
I agree, because your book, Jacob, Life After Breath, you're putting yourself out there. You're opening your heart, you're exposing yourself, your innermost spiritual journey to the world. And, I know what it's like, and Dr. Pat knows what it's like. When you put yourself out there, then a lot of people are going to agree and like it. And then a lot of people are going to disagree and have all sorts of issues with it. But what I'd like to ask is, with your near-death experience, do you think, and you were raised in a religious family, and I get that, but how has your near-death experience influenced or shaped your version of spirituality?
Yeah, for those familiar with the saying, it allowed me to beat to my own drum from a young age. And by that, it means, so much of our life, in order to, do something, we have to become something. We don't recognize that a lot of what we're looking for is within our own backyard. And so the near-death experience was a great informant that a lot of what I was seeking wasn't in someone else or another teaching. It can be found that, not to knock that, but that I already had a lot of answers within. And so I believe that prayer, is talking to God, but meditation is listening. And so from a young age, I was a great listener, to wisdom, to intuition. And I think I was able to embody who I was. And so much of identity is the world creating our mind and not our mind creating our world. And so the near-death experience is a very empowering, life transformational event. But I don't believe that the soul is soul. It's not alone. It's here to connect. And my goal is, if I'm known as the afterlife guy, I won't be happy. I want people to remember themselves as afterlife people and see that reflected in, life after breath and other experiencers.
Yeah. I mean, I want to take a short break if we could, but before we go to a break, could tell folks how they can get a copy of the book and find out more about you.
Yeah, you could purchase my book on Amazon. That's, a lot of the sales, or you could ask for a signed copy through my website at jacoblcooper.com. That's jacoblcooper.com.
And let's take a short break. One of the things I want to get back to for those of you out are listening, there's something early in the book that I found so absolutely powerful. And if you read about Jacob's covenant and you read about the message he heard, that by itself is a life's journey, I bet, filled with potholes, ups, downs, and sideways. When we come back, we'll talk about that and talk about how they shows up in so many ways. Let's take a short break. Jacob, our producer, Jacob, let's take a short break.
Do you feel like you and your significant other have lost their initial spark? Then let Coach Martez and Widrina guide you to strengthen your love and reignite that spark on the Coach Martez and Widrina Layton Show on Transformation Talk Radio. Understanding love, accepting truth, and changing perspective. For more information, make sure you go to dreambuilderscoaching.net. That is dreambuilderscoaching.net.
Melissa Johnson is a certified life coach, author, speaker, and creator of Wow Ministries, Worship Over Worry, designed to give you the tools needed to live a life of purpose. You have a choice daily to worry about your life and give up the fight, or decide to worship God through your pain and triumph victoriously. Melissa Johnson offers a variety of books, curriculums, and programs to guide you through a self-discovery journey.
Book your consultation with Melissa Johnson today at wowministriesllc.com.
We figured by the time we turned 50, we kind of had life figured out, but we were not prepared for the realities of midlife. Tune into And That's When I Realized, the truth and comedy of midlife, with me, Susan Dolce.
And me, Leon Dyer, every second and fourth Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific on TransformationTalkRadio.com. You're not alone in these challenges, and sometimes you just gotta laugh.
Find us at SusanDolce.com
and LeonDyer.com.
We remember a time when you could simply form a thought and it would manifest. The harmony was forgotten, but it is returning now. The Power of Inspiration and Awakening Radio with Juliet Griffin on TransformationTalkRadio.com each second and fourth Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific. We'll take you on adventures through the heart and spirit, exploring who we once were. This intuitive healer studied under the guidance of wolves, learning from their wisdom to master a higher frequency for a new state of mind. Visit OneTrueSelf.com.
everybody, I'm Mark Anthony, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Pat, and we are the Psychic and the Doc, and we have Jacob Cooper, author of Life After Breath. And Jacob is a fascinating man. He's not only had a near-death experience, but he's devoted his life to helping people. He's a Reiki master, a social worker, and a hypnotherapist who specializes in past life regression. Okay, Jacob. Now, you know, when you go to college, I mean, do you just say, I think I want to specialize in past life regression therapy? How did that happen?
Yeah, you know, I think it was very much in alignment with my life path and my work as a therapist. And what I saw was, you know, within psychotherapy, we could help people, but to a certain point. And hypnosis was great because it was almost kind of like that last stop on the train where you tried every form of therapeutic intervention, and there were still blockages with, you know, something a little bit complex, but called the subconscious mind. And so past life regression, I was really inspired by the works of, you know, Dr. Brian Weiss, a Yale-trained psychiatrist who was really, you know, pivotal in mainstreaming and giving a lot of capital, you know, and weight to past life regression, but also from reading a lot of the breakthroughs that came through this form of intervention.
Yeah. I mean, you know, one of the things, boy, you said it so well. I mean, as a matter of fact, I was telling Mark that, you know, when I graduated and had to decide on, you know, a clinical path, I moved to the state of Washington, and I realized as I was filing for my license that I couldn't talk about spirituality here at the time. And as a matter of fact, I could get in some trouble, you know, if I talked about spirituality or even astrology at that time. And that wasn't very long ago. And I just decided I can't do it. I don't know. I wouldn't know how to do that. And so, you know, these are the decisions we make. But, you know, I was reading about your covenant and what you describe in the book and what that gift was to you by your team.
Right.
Of really looking at thoughts.
Yeah.
And looking at them not just as looking, but carving out a way of life for that. Can you talk to that for a minute?
Yeah, you know, I think so much of us trust in our fear over the infinite love inside of us and around us. In a sense that my NDE reminded myself that there was this beautiful intelligence that pathed, you know, my life, and that intelligence is greater than my own limited fears and awareness. So I think a lot of our life could be shaped by our faith, our trust, and our knowing, you know, in confidence in this higher power that guided our life. And it's kind of like what Albert Einstein spoke about, you know, is the universe an ambivalent place, a loving place, or an untrustworthy place? And our life is very much an answer to that. I think that's very important in today's times where there's so many different reasons to lose all kinds of faith. But this has nothing to do with what's outside of us, but rather to do with what's inside. For what's inside lasts. You know, this is just an experience, but kind of like what Wayne Dyer would speak about. You take an orange, you squeeze it out, you get orange juice. And we take who we are, you get infinite consciousness, eternity, and we go on. And so with the near-death experience, it's often you're told that it's not your time, that you're to go. You're given a choice like I did. But I don't think you would have a near-death experience if you stayed there. You'd probably have death experience. So that way.
When you said that, you know, you got me thinking about Passover and near-death experiences. Think about it. Passover, death was everywhere. The angel of death was striking down the firstborn, and the Israelites who put the blood above, the doorpost, they were passed over. Same thing in an NDE. You come right up to the threshold of death, and then you are passed over. You go back. So that's very powerful. And tonight is Holy Thursday, which, according to the Christian tradition, Thursday was the Passover supper that Jesus had with his apostles, which was the Last Supper. So I always like, and you do this too, Jacob, you draw the parallels and the overlaps between the different belief systems, because when you get all the ego and the control of the people who run religions out of the way, and you get to the spirituality, it's exactly what you were saying. It's about the soul. It's the spirituality. It's the letting go. And you know, we talk about this quite a bit on this show. I mean, Dr. Pat and I, you know, we have a whole myriad of guests. And then when we have the call-in shows, many people call in. And, you know, it's their desire to have that connection with the infinite, with the souls. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So I want to get back to, though, the past life regression therapy. So does that mean that you do hypnosis sessions with people and access their prior lives?
Yes. You know, and it worked similar to those familiar with psychoanalytic work, where, yes, we go to past lives, but we also do something called an age regression, which is within this lifetime, and we go back. So it's kind of like a train, and you go back, you know, from the linear mind to understand time, because we know on that side there is no time, which is mind-boggling to our linear minds. But you go back into this, you know, lifetime and go back to different events. Then you go to the point in which you entered this lifetime. And then I do similar stuff, if you're familiar with Dr. Michael Newton's work, some of the life between lives and the other side, you know, and then we guide people to different, you know, past lives. And it's wonderful. I've been loving, you know, just sitting back and seeing what happens.
Yeah.
All right. So any juicy stories from anybody's past lives?
You know, I was doing a regression and another colleague of mine had the same experience. And I know, you know, Mark, you're a historian and intellect and a theologian too, so you'd appreciate this. You were doing a regression in a group, and someone looked at each other and they both had an experience that they knew was in ancient Egypt, and instantaneously they looked at each other, and another colleague of mine had that same thing. And so, you know, it makes sense because that was one of the longest historical periods, you know, in our time was ancient Egypt. But it was just this knowing that they stopped their group regression and they just knew that they saw each other and they had that knowing, which was great. But, you know, it works on so many different levels. There's so much versatility to it for understanding who we are, our life's purpose, and also, you know, people, when they hear near-death experience, they want that. And I'm sure, Mark, you could attest to this. It's not something you necessarily want because of the trauma involved and how complex it makes your life. But when you have past life regressions, you turn a belief in reincarnation into a knowing that we go on, you know, lifetime in and lifetime out in different bodies. So it's an expanded awareness that people could be empowered in, at the very least.
Yeah. And you went through that. I mean, you know, you talk about your experience, and I love this because, you know, I've often shared about how my favorite Friday afternoon was with Dr. Jacoby. Not really, but you talk about how you became weird to all your friends, you know, how you felt alienated from this world. And I think that it was so important to mention that in your story because, you know, here you are, this young person, and the world that you had now became awkward. You know, your friends looked at you differently.
Right.
But you talked about the light. Then the light was there, a door from another place. So you were caught, from what I picked up, you know, you were caught between places. I think at one point you said, I tried to walk through the door. What was that like as a young person?
Yeah, you know, I had an experience in my NDE where literally my brain cracked open, and that's when God and Spirit came in. And I don't wish that on anyone.
No.
But from that experience, I understood the brain as a filter, not a producer of life. And so after that, within preschool, I was having all of these, I was like a mini Mark. I was having all these interdimensional communication and experiences. And one day I turned to a classmate to see if that classmate was able to see what I saw. And I got like a Dwayne Johnson look. And I suffocated in my NDE due to whooping cough, but that suffocation lasted, almost 2 decades until I was able to take ownership. So I think in order to survive, I almost had to like put this in the filing cabinet because of the pace of the world. But to thrive, I needed to own it.
Yeah.
And that's it's like that beach ball that needed to come up in its time.
It's a good point because all three of us can relate to. It's hard enough being a kid, but then when you're a weird kid. Right. And we're all weird because of our abilities, our experiences, what we've been through. I remember, being in junior high school and wishing I was just, one of the guys that just fit in, like everybody else. And now it's like I realize that wasn't my path. And for the people whose path that is, that's wonderful for them. But what you've done in your work, Jacob, and in your book is bring to light that it's okay to be that weird kid.
What does a leaf in water ever add to life? Now you generate your own current. That's what we're supposed to do.
That is.
And I think that's a beautiful position. It's funny how we're in different positions of life and we look at it totally different. Where if we had who we are today, we would go back to that childhood and say, be that weird self, because that is your job.
Yeah.
That's what you're here to do, is to shake things up.
I'd be like, do that. And when you see Amazon come up on the stock exchange, buy it.
Wait a minute.
And Apple.
Well, I'll tell you, the greatest mistake I ever made is moving to the Pacific Northwest and somebody telling me, you should get that Starbucks stock. And I was like, coffee that's not like regular with cream and sugar like in New York? I should buy that? Oh my goodness. Right?
I had a family member that was about to invest in Apple right before the iPod.
Oh no.
And they just were told by a stockbroker no.
Oh no.
And so I'd be sitting prettier, if that happened, but it's all good.
And that's the one thing that people don't understand about near-death experiences, right? Because we have this way to categorize people and things that happen. And so every person that has a near-death experience must be psychic, or must have the ability to predict, or must be like Daniel in the Bible, or whatever that is. But because of the way these, the stories are being told, your book, Mark's book, people get to experience their own version of what this means, because in the end, I think you're right. If we could all go back to those moments, right, that we had an event in our lives that caused us to wake up from it different and honor that journey. But I got to tell you, when I'm reading your book, you are so much more comfortable from the way I'm reading this. You listen to that inner voice. There was so much that you're sharing in the book that's going to allow people to take a second look at what they're feeling ashamed of with this. Because there's a lot of guilt and shame that gets imposed on people that have experiences like this.
I think the greatest spiritual teachers aren't teachers, they're just mirrors.
That's right.
And, they just allow people to see that beauty. And we talk about oneness all the time. It's like a big new age talking point. But some people, they'll put certain souls up on a pedestal. They'll say, I'm one with you, but I can't be one with that. And so the beauty that we see is just a reflection, of what's within. And I made a post today that spirituality is not selectivity. I think we have a selection with what is and what isn't. But spirituality is being able, much like the near-death experience, to see that beauty in all things, So behind what meets the surface, and challenging as it is. But I know I come from, families in Holocaust, and that was one of the worst moments in modern day history. But I look at someone like a Viktor E. Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, who talked about ultimate freedom, and he's found like that in the ultimate oppressive time. And there's an inner world that we could have. And I love what Wayne Dyer would say is, you want to check in your life. If you're looking and focusing on the outside, there's a lot of discomfort. So we want to be informed but not enslaved. But we're looking inward. That's where a lot of the peace and answers come from. Life begins.
Yeah. I want to take a short break, but before we do, again, please tell people how they can get a copy of your book and how they can find out more about you, Jacob.
Yeah, Life After Breath is available on Amazon, and you could visit my website for further information at jacoblcooper.com. That's jacoblcooper.com.
And maybe when we come back, we can get Jacob to talk about Saint Cecilia. Just wondering if he might. Let's take a short break. All of us, we all got saints. Let's take a short break. We'll be right back.
Not just talk, conversation for profound self-awareness. Stick with us. Your best life awaits on transformationtalkradio.com.
Are you ready to invest in your best self? Join Sabrina Wright as she shares tools for creating joy and balance in your life every single day. Sabrina is here to help you become your greatest advocate and empower you to make decisions that will help you live your best life. The Live the Good Life Show, connecting your physical and spiritual self, every second Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific on transformationtalkradio.com. Find Sabrina at the right, WRIGHT, balance.com.
Do you get stuck in that someday attitude, living the same day over and over again with no action? The Becoming You Show, big ideas that inspire, impact, and influence your life with Leah Rowling is for you. Tune in every Friday at 11 a.m. Central on transformationtalkradio.com. This show will have you feeling inspired to take action with purpose and intention. For more information and to get in touch with me, visit www.leahrowling.com.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Psychic in the Dark with me and Mark Anthony. Hey, Mark, let folks know how they can find out more about you, and then we're going to hop over to Jacob, our fantastic guest today.
No, absolutely. Please visit my website, afterlifefrequency.com, which is just like my new book, Afterlife Frequency. And I invite everyone to sign up for my newsletter. And on the homepage of my website under calendar of events, you'll see how you can vote for my book is up for the cover award, book of the year. So you can go to that. So that's afterlifefrequency.com. But now back to you, Jacob. And if people want to find out about Jacob's book, Life After Breath, go to jacoblcooper.com, and you can find out about his book and about getting an autographed copy of it. Let me tell you something, folks. I would not have endorsed it if it was not a great book.
Now, look, before the break, I brought up Saint Cecilia for a minute. And the reason I did that is I think that if you really take a look at stories that are told, like the one that you're telling, there's a saint of some kind that shows up, whether it's a saint that's a relative or a saint that's a dog or a saint that's a friend or a saint that's really a saint. Somewhere along the way, these people show up in our lives. I think we all have them, right? For me, it was my stepmom that stopped my dad from sending me to therapy because I was seeing dead people and talking to Jesus. So she jumped in and said, we're not spending any money on therapy. You're wasting your time. But out of all this, once in a while, we'll have an experience where we get to a Saint Cecilia. And I just thought it would be interesting for you to talk a little bit about that, because I found this a really interesting chapter in the book. I didn't expect it to be in the book. I didn't expect to have a conversation like that as I was reading this in the book. I didn't expect it to be a conversation about marginalized and oppression. And I was very thrilled and saddened by it. But it's part of the journey, isn't it?
Right. Well, I always love an author by the name of Dan Millman. He wrote a book, Peaceful Warrior, and when reading that book, Dan talks about his relationship with, a guy named Socrates, which was kind of like his guru, or which really means his teacher, which came out of unexpected places. And I always wanted that from reading that. And then shortly after, within my own family, I had someone that I just totally overlooked, that it was just kind of there, but I didn't look closely enough. And I had, this beautiful aunt in my family that I recognized was kind of like my near-death experience was, all things were in this backyard, in this beautiful playground, which I actually had my near-death experience in, a playground and a ladder and a slide. That's a whole other thing. But she was my mentor. She taught, people like, what's his name, Jose Feliciano, who sung the song Feliz Navidad. But she was a teacher of those who are visually impaired. But she lived that on a literal basis. She was into all this work, and she was a studious Virgo, but she would see the unseen. And at the time, I was not a good student. I once applied to my sister's school, where she was like the star student, and I wrote an essay, and they said, "You're the brother. You're not material for our school." But she once picked up my writing, and she says, "You are a great writer." And I'm like, at the time, I was in the lowest level of remedial courses in a community college. But again, that was her. She saw past the surface, and she saw the unseen. But what was beautiful about her was she gave me one last message about soul family. I heard so much about it, and she would give me all the readings from Sylvia Brown to all these other, people that influenced her. But as she was having deathbed visions when she was about to leave her body, she left one last message, which was, if you look at a family portrait, people might look different, but you look at the eyes and the depths of it, there's something connecting people. And I just thought, all right, that's kind of cool, whatever. But then I was getting a reading, and her name, Saint Cecilia, came in. She's like, I'm connecting to Saint Cecilia. And I knew that's how she would come to me. But she's like, why am I keep on hearing the word picture? Picture. What is that message? And I just knew that was her message about soul family and how deep its roots are beyond this body, beyond this lifetime. So the point I'm trying to make is a lot of things that we're looking for are in our own backyard. We just have to take a look at a closer level, much like our soul. We just bypass all these things, and we try to become something else than what we truly are. And
I love the way you end the chapter, because I think you say something like, despite being a black sheep in the family, right? This was a way for you to understand the pack. I think you use the word pack, right? That family that goes at a deeper level, where you can't really dismiss in words. You can't really dismiss a telepathic connection. And my fear is that in the digital world we live in, this may become a lost art for so many. And I'm hoping that somehow that all of the digitalness that's going on allows us to explore more of what is untapped into. Yeah. So, Mark?
Absolutely. And, I like what you're saying is, we can't really get away from the soul, and we shouldn't get away from the soul, but people tend to ignore that so much. And Jacob, have you found, in reflecting upon your NDE, because, I realize that when you have an NDE, and like you, I had one as a toddler, it's always there to some extent. And it always is something that I can look back to for inspiration. But I think what happens is that the soul is representative of the light. And the light cannot be polluted, but it can be blocked, and it gets blocked by the human ego. Now, what in your work, not only just as an NDE researcher, but also as a therapist, how have you seen the interplay of the ego with the soul?
I think particularly with conflict, that's kind of work a lot, where a lot of times the ego wants to be right and the soul wants to create harmony. And harmony is the new right in our world. Sadly, we if we think that if we really connect to the ego, we see ourselves as separate. And if I'm right, you're wrong, that's a win. But from the soul, that is a setback. And so I think the soul recognizes the value of harmony, the value of that. And it's particularly in today's world where, we're split and fragmented in so many ways. We have to get back to our roots. We have to get back to that. We have to get back to finding that middle ground, finding that harmony between amongst all the differences, that really helped a way to move past, this right and wrong game. But also, it's about surrendering to a possibility of looking at life in a different way. We say checking the ego and finding a way to see things in a differently, and changing the way we look at things allows the things that we look at to change. And I think that deals with a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy and reframing. But letting that ego go is important in terms of stretching ourselves in our life.
I have another question. Have you done hypnotherapy sessions with fellow NDEers, other people that have had near-death experiences?
Not yet. I've run, a good deal of support groups for near-death experiences, which I found fascinating. But I know I once heard what you said, and maybe you could agree with this or disagree, but we label a lot of these terms from NDEs, spiritually transformative experiences, shared death experiences, but it's all kind of, many pass up the mountain, but a similar light, just kind of different. But not, that would be of interest, particularly to regress the person back to that and to kind of heal a lot of trauma. I've done a lot of that work in my life through my own psychotherapy, and that's been helpful, but I haven't had a client yet of that.
Yeah, I just think that, when we were here talking about this, I just thought that would be a really fascinating.
I agree. Yeah.
Could even be a basis for yet another book.
I think it's fascinating because it helps connect the dots. I did a past life regression that pointed to a very early incident in my life, which I never put it together. I have a giant scar on my forehead, and nobody would ever tell me where I got it. And so I did I think I did it with Wendy. I can't remember exactly who. I'd done a couple. And my uncle was alive. And so I was able to go back to my only living relative, and find out from him what happened then, what happened at that age. Because what I remembered was jumping on a bed, I lived in the projects, jumping on a bed and hitting a radiator. And that's what came out. And when I went to my uncle, he was like in Italian. He was like, la, 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 sacrilege. I mean, he just went off about it. And then when he calmed down, he gave me the truth. And that's what I love about this, because people spend a lifetime not understanding where the gaps are. And you go through life as a young person, ADD, ADHD, you're on the spectrum, you're slow. Just a million things are happening right now with people. But if we could have a way to help people connect the dots, because a lot of time the truth of things is hidden. Like the truth of one of the family members seeing dead people or seeing people. And I think that's why this book and what Mark does, what you both do, is so important. Because I think the age of shame is no longer the game. I think all of us have to really support each other and support others that go through experiences like this. And they will get that from your book, Jacob.
Yeah.
They will clearly get from the way you wrote this book, because you could have written this book in a million other ways, but you didn't. You focus on the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think what happens is we have a lot of transference of our parents onto God, and and so in our world, and so this hopefully could allow people to repair some of the relationship with God or with spirituality, to reframe it and to recognize that we have the ability to see things in a different way. And that's the beauty of transformational experiences. We have these shake-up periods that allow us, that we kind of hold on to this reality
of what we're viewing life in, but that life is not closed-ended, it's open-ended. And near-death experience, having that didn't give me a monopolization of truth, but rather a quest to see it and expand it every day that I'm here on this earth and beyond.
Well, keep writing and keep speaking for sure. Because everything from beginning to end of the book, even your acknowledgement section of the book, I thought, wow, it's so important that we do take moments to really think. I thank my uncle every day for sharing the truth in the later years of his life. And I found out why this experience was never told to my parents, why the hospital records were never told, why my uncle paid everybody off, because my sister, 12 years older than me, was supposed to be watching me. And she had been in trouble so many times as a teenager for not doing it. My uncle described in half Italian, I had to have it translated later, half Italian, half English, the greatest family cover-up you've ever heard. But thank goodness for him to finally tell the truth. And thank goodness for you and Mark being a truth teller, right, Mark?
Well, it's important for all of us to share our stories, because there's people out there that don't have the support groups that we've had. And all of us, when we were young, it was very difficult for us. And so what have we done? We've gone into professions where we are providing a safe haven for people who had an NDE, who are in recovery, who've had, atrocious things happen to them as a child, who want to communicate with loved ones in spirit, who are challenging the social stigmas of doing these things. And so for the people who don't have that it's important for us to tell our truth. And that's what you've done, Jacob. That's what you do, Dr. Pat. And that's what I strive to do as well. And, and Jacob, that's one of the reasons that Dr. Pat and I decided to do this show. We wanted to do something that was different than anything else, where, everybody can come and tell their story. Yeah. So that's why we really appreciate you coming on the show tonight. I would look forward to having you come back and talk about other things. And because you've got a whole myriad of topics to discuss with your background. And I understand you're working on a new book. Can you give us any glimpses?
All right, sneak peek.
Yeah. Well, I can't call it Glimpses of Eternity. That's Raymond Moody's book. That's one of my favorite titles. Outside of, I got Mark's books here: The Afterlife Frequency,
right,
Never Letting Go, and I got Evidence of Eternity. All three, I call them the Holy Trinity. They're wonderful books. But my next book is called The Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder, and
nice. That's perfect.
I'm in the editorial process right now of it, and very excited. And I view life after breath as karma, as kind of like the story, where the wisdom of Jacob's Ladder is the dharma, is the message, is the meaning, is a lesson. And I find, that gives me life, is finding something at hand to work on, a project. It keeps me alive, it keeps me going. I'm very grateful to be, in this time of life where that's accepted and embraced. I'm sure you feel the same way, to be alive right now.
Oh, yeah.
Many people are complaining, but there's a double-edged sword to it. It's a great time of freedom to take ownership and to make impact.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You're right. I mean, those of us that have parents that were locked up or drugged to the point of suicide because they were different, we understand that was a time where this conversation, they'd be knocking on our doors right now.
Yeah. We'd be put in the blue room, so yeah.
Oh, don't even bring that room up. Oh my gosh, now I'm having a hot flash.
No.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you all. Mark, last words?
Everybody, we're coming up on Passover, on Easter, and this is the time to follow the teachings of our faith about peace, love, and understanding. And with that, I want to bid everyone a beautiful night. Pray for peace throughout the world. And Dr. Pat and I will be back next week because it's our Earth Day show. So be a force of nature next Thursday on The Psychic and the Doc. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Everybody.
Namaste.
Thank you, Jacob. And
good night, everyone.
Thank you.
The views expressed on this program are those of the host,